But Miranda, I mean, this is the first time we had talked to them in detail, I think. This is Ken Cunningham, President CEO we talked to. I mean, I don't know. With these things, I think, everyone looks to, well, I mean, they have all these projects, but really what you need to do is find one big, major, valuable deposit, right? I mean, otherwise, there's no 10-bagger on the. I mean, the nice thing about these stocks is they're not spending money. They have $6 or $7 million bucks.
It's a project generator.
Right. Oh. But everyone looks at Virginia, right, as the model. I mean, right? I mean, maybe to some extent like Altius.
Well, yeah.
They were a $20 million company, and then they became a $200 million company because they had Eleanor, and they were able to, get left them with a nice NSR plus some cash.
Yeah, or Strategic Metals was, doing pretty well when ATAC was doing well. So.
Oh, right, or that, that kind of thing. I mean, I think even Dundee to some extent, with the Back River and they have another one in Serbia or something. So I think, I mean, these companies are kind of singles and doubles, but they're. I guess the nice thing is in this market, again, I think this is one of those that has really strong support in terms of the shareholder.
Ken seemed clearly most excited about the project in Nevada, where they're going back to drill.
Oh, right, yeah. I mean, yeah. I was just gonna briefly mention that one. I mean, that's the one I think that if you look at the near-term potential, that Red Hill or whatever, I think that was what the name of it was in the Southern Cortez trend. Maybe the name's not exactly, but I guess this company, New Legacy. I did briefly look at New Legacy, and they did talk about that one hole that he was saying how it had all the characteristics of your Carlin type deposits with dirty carbonates and brecciation and sort of evidence of dissolution with voids and things in the rock that would indicate that there was space in there for deposit and looked like it was the right type of rocks. I guess they hit that in the core hole that they drilled. It's a lot harder to see all of that type of stuff in the reverse circulation, which is, I guess, most of the other holes that they're drilling. But I guess this core hole was drilled to confirm an RC hole that had come up with pretty decent grades in that area. And, the thing about this is people don't realize, so, as I mentioned, I think I talked to you, but more so a couple of the other subscribers that are looking at some other companies in the area, is that these deposits are not easy to identify. You can drill around something and be within 100 meters of each side of it and never hit it, just because of their complexity. And you could have millions of ounces. I mean, the ones that Barrick, what are those? The Southern Cortez area, the names escape me, but he was saying that maybe, I mean, the last time they updated it, this looked like maybe it was like 7 million or whatever ounces. And there's a strong suspicion among a lot of the geologists that before they're done with it, they end up with 20 million ounces. Well, that's an area that they had done a significant amount of exploration and drilling on in the past, and they never hit. Once they found it, once they understood what the controls were and how this thing looked, the thing went from, a million ounces to 3 to 7 to now they're thinking it could be 20. In a pretty discrete, space. It's not something that you could just drill every 100 meters and do a fence and then say, oh, it's cut off in this direction. Your typical fence, you could have several deposits, multi-million ounces, right between, fence holes. So it's a different type of exploration. I mean, Long Canyon is very similar. Long Canyon was known to be, to have significant mineralization. They've drilled some very decent holes, I think, 5-10 years ago, into parts of it, as I recall. And it took, a very significant amount of structural understanding of what this thing looks like before they finally were able to figure out how to drill it in such a way that it showed that even though you could put one hole here and that has grade and the other one right next to it doesn't matter, because here is what the resource envelope looks like. It snakes around. You can't just drill one hole here and put the next one along the trend and expect to hit, because the things are offset and whatever. So a lot of these deposits are like that, and they have a significant vertical component to them. You try to drill from, and they tend to be a little bit deeper. So trying to drill from surface something that is somewhat vertical, but it's not like a vein, because it doesn't have a lot of, it doesn't have vertical continuity much beyond the actual, where the mineralization is. I think in veins you could say, well, I found the vein and I just have to find where the ore shoot is. This is a little bit different. So who knows? I mean, I looked at the thing. It's a sliver where this thing is, and they've drilled about 100 holes, he was saying, into this thing. I mean, into the property, which is, I guess, a pretty decent-sized property, and hadn't really come up with that much other than one or two of these holes. But yet, you can come up with a large deposit, in a small area. So
I don't recall the 100 holes discussion, but
I think he had mentioned there's 100 holes drilled into that particular property. Now, I don't know how many were in this one section of it where this RC hole had come up with something decent, and where this core hole has been put in to somewhat confirm what the RC was coming up with as far as gold grades, but probably more so to see what the rocks are, what the actual preserved rock. Because with the RC drilling, you just get little cuttings, so you can't really tell, for example, very well what if the rock has laminations or what the orientation is, or even what type of brecciation, what's filled in between, what's the matrix. There's a lot of things you don't know with the RC. So he seemed like he was pretty excited about the core, and thought that it would come back. Felt pretty confident it would come back with some pretty decent gold in it.
Right.
So I don't know if that's there's a reason near term, but I mean, this kind of company, I wouldn't disagree with Brent Cook and some of these other guys that they just keep working enough, and you typically don't have them diluting. So I forget, this had like 50 million shares or whatever. You don't end up diluting yourself to death, and the more chances you give yourself with projects, the more chance you have for discovery. I think he even stated, you make discoveries with a drill. So you gotta be drilling.
Well, something like you can't buy drill holes.
Yeah, or you can't buy discoveries. Yeah,
you'd rather have people commit to drilling than just giving them cash.
Oh yeah, that was a great point. So he was But we should tell. Wait, I just put that sort of just to remember that. So he had mentioned that one of the things that they do is when they do JVs, some companies like to get cash and shares and all this kind of stuff. He'd be actually more interested if they took that same money and committed it to spending that on drilling. So if they're going to put $2 million into a thing and give them, let's say 500,000 shares, he may be more interested. Hey, put the additional $500,000 and give me 20 more drill holes. So that's actually kind of an interesting,
Well, it's good from a shareholder perspective because you can't cash in drill holes, like stock options.
Right. I mean, they have to pay. They have to still pay for their. I think they still have to pay for the G&A and overhead and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, if you're careful enough and you have a pretty good value on your stock, and you can always raise little bits of money to pay if your G&A is under good control. But
right.
You can't raise.
I guess did mention Rick Rule Global Investments. Came in and did the last financing with them in tough times. So he wants to get the share price back up to at least 60 cents, or Rick's not going to be too happy.
To thank him for that, right? Yeah, no, he had mentioned that that some people had pulled out of financing, or there's some question that some people may not be willing to close it because the shares had gone down below the rate that they were using the financing, because obviously the markets every day now are kind of going crazy. And it was Rick or whoever else came in and said, look, let's just do this. This is a plan. Anyone that backs out of it because they want to get a lower price, I'll pick up their stuff. So, that's there's a few companies it seems like that have that kind of support. it seems like those are the ones, if we can somehow find all those and then, I mean, that's a good start right there to have a portfolio of those, but then, the ones that have really highly prospective things going on, that seems like a home run to me. Because, as the retail investor or the ones that are owned by these, institutions that are hot money type things, I would even call Paulson and some of these other guys hot money, are not the type of, when you have, there's different types. Some people say, oh, institutional holdings. Well, guess what? Some of the ones that were institutionally held had the biggest drops in '08 because the institutions were seeing redemptions and they had to sell. So I don't know if you want straight institutional. I think you have to look at who the institutions are. I don't think like even Eric Sprott necessarily, unless Eric Sprott personally is Eric Sprott. But it's a Sprott fund that gets, look at what they did with Molly. They destroyed the Molly sector because they concentrated all this money into it, and then they had too many redemptions. They had to close off the fund. And I'm sure most of the Molly companies were on their cash as king list because it was getting obliterated. I don't know how much. I think actually he did a pretty decent job not to dump everything on the market and stuff, but that definitely did not help. So having institutional holdings,
well, just as
whether it's Eric Sprott or whoever, I don't necessarily.
Going back to Lupaka for a moment, speaking with Jeff, professional hockey player, a lot of well-off friends and connections. It sounds like a lot of their shareholders are just wealthy individuals that they're in no need of having to liquidate their shares to pay the bills, and they're not subject to redemption. So that's kind of the ideal. You want the maybe not the institutions. You just want strong, wealthy shareholders who aren't going to need the money anytime soon.
So I think that's true. Right. Sometimes it is more retail, but that's what I call like private wealth. So it'd be interesting to look at some of these companies and say, okay, let's go through who are all the key holders and identify the ones that are really strong hands, and then the ones that have a very significant portion of their holdings. The other one that frankly got me, because they have a decent asset that they're building and they have a good plan, I think that probably needs some more work, but is Northern Gold, right, with the shareholder support that's being planned there. I think there's more private wealth money that wants to come into that, and who knows? Maybe they eventually want to take private, whatever. It doesn't matter to me. It's going to have to be a premium. So I think those companies are probably going to end up, getting the money that they need to keep moving forward, and and the support as well, not getting as much panicked selling off. And if someone else sells, maybe those guys will be like, oh, okay, I'll pick up those shares. I don't mind owning more of the company. So there seems to be a subset of those, and it's better, I think, than some of these other ones that are what I've called, and I think now others are calling these.
That reminds me now, East Asia.
Cult of personality. Sorry, go ahead.
The East Asia mystery buyer who may have caused a lot of volatility was Forbes and Manhattan. They're like a pseudo Forbes and Manhattan company now, since they own 10-15%, something like that.
Oh, right, yeah. Well, I think East Asia is far from being one of these to consider.
That wouldn't even be the same type of. It just jogged my memory.
Right.
Responsible for some of the shenanigans. Price.
Right. I guess one thing we could look at in terms of, well, I don't know if it's shenanigans, but one thing we could look at is hey, which companies have shareholder reps on the board of directors? Like, that might be a good filter, because obviously if they have a shareholder, a significant shareholder that has a nominee on the board, that means that there's a large ownership by a very interested party in the stock. Then on the other hand, look at like a Baja Mining, and it doesn't really help that necessarily always a very interested shareholder, because it could just still be a crap situation. But let's move on from this one. This is definitely one where we're looking at in terms of need to do more evaluation, but everything sounds like it's a strongly held, strong company, and obviously it has following and all that kind of stuff.